in this webinar, our head of people operations, Rachel, will help exactly with that, and she'll walk you through a framework and tools for succeeding in a remote setting. So yes, take it away, Rachel.
Cool. Let me just share my screen then.
Oh, and I forgot to say that if you guys have any questions about remote work and productivity in a remote setting, please put them in the chat and we can address them later in the Q&A.
Cool. So I think everything's fine, right? And you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect, thanks. So thanks a lot, Marta, for the introduction. So as Marta just mentioned, my name is Rachel, and I'm the head of HR operations at Zengrowth. So in addition to that, I also own my own company, and on the side, I like to run marathons. And I say this because I think I, like you, have a lot of different roles and also a lot of different goals that I want to get done. And because of this, productivity becomes even more important. So when it comes to productivity, I would say I don't think I'm the most productive person in the world, but I'm working on it. So when I look at maybe productivity heroes, for example, maybe Adriana Huffington or Greta, who is historically very productive, or Cal Newport, whose name you'll hear a bit in this webinar. I think these are people that have really practiced productivity quite a bit and have found the rhythm that really works for them. And I think for me personally, I've come a long way, but it's something that I'm really interested in. So I'm looking forward to sharing what I've learned and what works for me, and what my heroes of productivity have in terms of wisdom with you today. So I think a good place to start when it comes to productivity is by establishing a common definition. So I define productivity here as the act of choosing the most important thing from a large group of possible things to do, and then most importantly, doing them. So in this definition, I think you see that productivity is a couple things, right? So on the one hand, it's a process, but it's also a practice. So in terms of process, I'm talking about, the gathering of activities, the making of a selection, the organization, and then the execution. So I think this piece is really where we tend to focus. So you might not be aware, but the productivity market when it comes to apps, for example, is valued at about $45 billion US. So that's a lot of productivity tools out there for us all to be using. However, in a study that Indeed did this year of 1,500 adults, they found that over half of them were already suffering from burnout. So this means that despite all of the apps out there and the tools, something isn't really clicking. And I would argue that this is the practice piece. So the practice is really about the soft skills, the self-management that you need to hone in order to keep the practice going. So this is developing a proactive mindset. It's also open and honest communication and setting boundaries. So in this webinar, we're going to look at both. So maybe you're already starting to wonder, oh geez, sounds like a lot of work, is it worth it? It really is. So productivity is something that I would say you do for yourself. On the one hand, you do it in order to be more efficient at work so that you can get more done and really have this feeling of doing your best work. I think all of us know this feeling of pride, when you're able to deliver something and this really represents the best of what I could do. And usually in order for that to happen, you have to intentionally plan your time and execute. And this is what productivity is about. It's also about, being intentional at work so that after work you can shut off and really savor, these moments outside of the office or outside of the home office, as it were, and live your best life. When it comes to breaking it down in terms of a process, so as I mentioned, the process has 3 steps. Step 1 is gathering activities. Step 2 from there would be, making a selection and organizing your calendar. And then step 3 is the execution. So I've organized this webinar so that we can go step by step and take a look at these, and then also take a look at the practice piece. So at these, self-management capabilities that we each need to hone in order to really, do the step well. So as Marta mentioned, at Zengrowth, we work completely remotely. And I think in terms of remote work, treating productivity in terms of a process and a practice becomes even more important. So I think 2020 showed us, that being productive at home is a bit more than, maybe finding a home office and, putting a plant on the desk. It's also about having these, strong self-management skills to really advance your work and guard your time. So as we go through, as I said, we'll be taking a look at both of these quite closely. So step 1, gathering activities. So, when it comes to this, you probably already have a goal that you've aligned with your team. So this could be a project, for example, it could be an OKR. You have a goal, and this goal comes with a large backlog of activities that you need to do in order to get it done. So when you align with your team, hopefully, maybe on a Friday, ideally, this way that you're able to already set up your schedule ahead of the weekend and get a head start. You align with your team perhaps at your stand-up. So here together with your team, you're taking a look at your backlog and you're prioritizing. So you select the one activity or maybe 1 or 2 that's going to really drive things forward, what you're going to focus on for the next week. So during this alignment, you prioritize, so you select then what you're going to be focusing on. This is also the time that you want to take to really find and flag dependencies. In terms of the practice piece, communication here is really key. So when it comes to finding and flagging dependencies, for example, really be proactive in your communication. So don't assume that anyone, else on your team is going to think, okay, if, Rachel wants to get that done next week, I might need to deliver this, this, or this. I think you need to really, go to your teammates and figure out how that alignment is going to be working, and then take it on board for your planning for the week ahead. Also being honest about what's possible. I think just starting out in my career, it was difficult to know, how long tasks took. And I think as you go, you get a better understanding about how long something takes. However, for me personally, I tend to have a problem. I like to please people, and this means that sometimes I can overcommit. So if you're like this, what I found helps is really, bite your tongue, sometimes, physically, and really resist the urge to take on more than you can, or more, than these 1 or 2 tasks that you've prioritized. Remember that if, you end up at the end of next week and you still have time, you can still raise your hand for more. But at this moment, you really want to keep it to the 1 or 2 things that are going to bring you further. Also, during your team alignment, this is the time to highlight trade-offs. So of course, you're prioritizing what the task is going to be. It might not be the thing that you think is the priority. Perhaps as a team, you pick something else, but then to communicate this within the team and make sure that everyone's on the same page when it comes to what's being done and what's not being done. So from there, the next step is then to organize. So you have your 1 task, hopefully, or maybe 1 or 2 that are going to be your priority for the next week. The next thing is to know when your best focus time is. So for each of us, depending on the task, there is probably something within this task that's a bit challenging. Perhaps perhaps it requires a bit of critical thought, for example, or strategic thinking, but something that's going to take thought and probably demands, quiet and focus. So for this, each of us has times throughout the day where our energy naturally peaks. And this depends a lot on your sleep schedule. So here, the best thing is to know when your energy peaks are during the day and move your focus time during those times. So I'll give you a look at a couple tools and we can talk about a quiz that will help you figure this out. From there, once you understand, okay, this is my task, this is how much time it's going to take, this is how much time I'm going to spend on it per day, you want a time block. So this is, finding those times during the day where your energy is high and really blocking them off so that you have that time that's not going to get eaten up by meetings to really sit down and do the work. So what I like to do is to use my Google Calendar to really block that in. You could even think about creating a recurring meeting if your calendar tends to get filled up, but block that time off. Lastly, you want to control where the meetings go. So just hop ahead to the tools. So in terms of time blocking and controlling, you can either do this the analog way, time blocking with pen and paper. There's the time block planner from Cal Newport. You can either make it yourself, it's quite easy, or you can buy one. But the idea is that you sit and you intentionally plan when your focus time is going to be, when are the meetings, and then next to it, you're able to make adjustments so that you learn as you go how much time things actually took. Personally, I like to do this in my Google Calendar because I have my Google Calendar open every day, so I can put the blocks in there. And then I can kind of glance at the calendar, see what I'm supposed to be doing. And if it's for focus work, that means that time's already blocked off for meetings, for example. So this sort of hits two birds with one stone. However, for example, in my role, not everyone uses my Google Calendar to, invite me to meetings. So for this, I also use Calendly. These are where all of my external meetings go. So I've already delineated a pile of time, I think it's 1 to 4 in the afternoon, where you can arrange to have a meeting with me. So for example, this is also a good way to make sure that your meetings don't end up all over the place, that they're, maybe tucked in a time of day where your energy might be a bit low, or where you're not going to be doing your focus work, and you can divert them all over there. When it comes to understanding when the best time for you is to focus, it's good here to understand what your chronotype is. So there are 4 chronotypes, and this is basically the time of day where you naturally have the most energy, and it's connected to your sleep schedule. So if you go to Google, you can just type, chronotype quiz. There are quite a few of them out there. They're short, and this will give you also a better indication as to, are you someone who focuses better in the morning, or is it more in the afternoon? As I said before, though, I think a lot of us probably already intuitively know this. So in terms of the soft skills here, it's communication, but it's also holding boundaries. So communicating your focus time to your team. And I think in terms of the communication, of course, your team alignment is a good time to let people know, like, hey, maybe I'm trying this new thing out. I'm going to be having blocks of focus time. I'm going to put them in my calendar, and I'll also put like a notification on Slack. But during this time, I'm not going to be answering notifications. So just so that people know that there's going to be maybe an hour of lag time there. The tricky thing here, I believe, is really holding the boundary. So it's easy to, put up a notification. It's easy to, tell people something, but then you actually have to do it. For me, what helps here is really to mute the notifications so that I can't hear them coming in. I think, just hearing a notification can already, maybe disrupt my focus time. And I think once you hear the notification, you've already got it in your mind that someone wants you and you're distracted. So mute your notifications, hold the boundary, and as you go, your team will also get used to you not being responsive when you have focus time, and will understand how to get in touch with you if there's an emergency. So at this moment, maybe you're thinking, yeah, but Rachel, I have so many meetings. And I think before I joined Zengrowth, I was working for a large e-com here in Berlin. And I remember the kinds of days I used to have sometimes, where days just got filled with meetings and it looked like a Tetris game. And I think here, there are a couple steps that you can do to take back your time. And I think this comes in the form of 3 questions. So, I think when a meeting comes in, the best thing is not to assume that the person who sent you the invite, you know, they may not have spent a lot of time to really think about how you fit into the group. So I think ask a couple questions to understand what the meeting is and how you're going to be contributing, and if, you know, your contribution is worth that time. So I think a good place to start is asking about the objective of the meeting, especially if it wasn't in the meeting itself. I remember during my time at this ecom, I had one tech colleague who said to me, I have a personal policy and I don't accept meetings that don't have an objective and don't have an agenda. And I think this is a really great place to start, especially if you're a team lead. This is a good meeting culture I think you can initiate in your own team. From there, once you have the objective, and I think if the objective is, you know, to get everyone aligned or to get on the same page, already there you can kind of think, you know, okay, does this have to be a meeting or could it be an email? If it is something a bit more active, the second step is to clarify your contribution. So are you going to be actively contributing in this meeting, or again, are you more in a passive role? So if you are in a passive role, you might think about declining the meeting and suggesting another way to add value. So perhaps by reviewing a GDoc, for example, or reviewing some slides, having a lunch with colleagues, for example. These are other ways to add value that will guard your focus time throughout the day. If you do need to attend the meeting, and depending, I guess, what meeting culture is like at your organization, you might have this meeting culture where everything kind of tends to run over 10 to 15 minutes. And then, you know, your 3 meetings have eaten up, you know, another hour of your day. And here I would say, like, a good phrase to keep in mind is having a hard stop. So, you know, at the beginning of the meeting, just saying like, hey, just to let you know, I have a hard stop at 2:30 and I'm going to have to leave. So that's clear, and then you leave. So step 3, the last step, is where you could say the rubber hits the road. This is about execution. So by this time, you've already organized your calendar, you've blocked off your time, and it's about working the plan. In addition to working the plan, also tracking what you get done and how long it takes. And this is going to give you an even better understanding of how long things take in reality. You know, so maybe you, I don't know, in terms of, you said I need to write this report or I need to, you know, work on this document. I gave myself 40 minutes. It actually ended up taking an hour. So now, you know, I've noted this down, and for the next time when it comes to planning my time, I understand like, okay, this kind of written work actually takes a bit longer. It's an hour and not maybe, 40. And this will give you a better understanding as you go on as to how much work you can take on and what's feasible. And then lastly here, very important, take breaks and refuel as you go. And this will keep your energy steady throughout the day. In terms of a couple tools that can help you here, so with working the plan, I really like to use the Pomodoro timer, which means tomato in Italian. It was developed in the 80s by an Italian student who used a tomato-shaped kitchen timer to block his time into 25-minute blocks. So you break your time up to 25-minute blocks. You then have 5 minutes where you can step away from the work. Again, resist the urge to go onto Instagram or to scroll your WhatsApp messages, you know, and take that time to really just let your mind rest. You can find a Pomodoro timer as well online. There are quite a few there, or maybe just set a timer on your phone. From there, you know, tracking what you do. So again, you can use the analog time, the time block planner, and just like note down how long things took in actuality. Or what I like to do sometimes is to use my Google Calendar, and I'll go back and I'll just adjust the time. So at the end of the day, I get a better sense for, you know, where did I use my time? What did I do? And how long did it take? In terms of resting and refueling, you know, if you are using the Pomodoro timer, you have these 5 minutes resting blocks. A nice way to use them is then, for example, with a Headspace meditation. So that, again, they have a free one on their website. It's just 5 minutes of guided meditation that will, you know, help you mentally refresh a bit. At the end of the day, it's also important to have some sort of shutdown ritual. So, you know, you should have delineated a time when the workday is going to end. Not that it just keeps on going, because of course you need that sleep. So your stopping work, you're taking a look at your to-do list, thinking about what you were able to cross off, give yourself a pat on the back for that and celebrate it a bit. And then also take a look and start blocking the time off for the next day. So given your priority that you set, how are you going to block the time? How much focus time do you need? In terms of the amount of focus time that you set, if this is new for you, you probably want to start with an hour or an hour and a half, then like using the Pomodoro timer to block that off. And then every 2 weeks, kind of take stock to see where you are and add another 20 minutes. So as you go, you'll sort of build this muscle and you'll be able to do more focused time at once. So from there, in terms of you've got your calendar and then, yeah, you want to shut your computer. And then I think it's a good idea to do just like some sort of physical activity. So if you're working at home, especially, maybe taking a walk around the block to simulate, a commute back home, or maybe doing some stretching to really, delineate your working time from now your private time. So in practice, of course, this sounds quite easy, quite simple. It's going to be uncomfortable, as most new things are. So focus time, really focusing on something and not having distractions, not having your phone out. This is already something that I think for us nowadays is something that we don't usually do. So it's uncomfortable to do at first. And this is why you want to start small and, expand as you go. I think a lot of these soft skills, especially when it comes to proactive communication, for example, to being honest, to resisting the urge to overcommit, these things also take some getting used to. So just to expect it not to be comfortable, and but keep working at it because it is worth it. And I think especially with these soft skills, you'll notice that it makes the process steps a lot more efficient. And lastly, to celebrate success. So to really, take some time and see, like, as you go on, that the quality of your focus time is hopefully getting better, and you're able to spend even more time a day focusing. It's getting easier, perhaps, to resist the urge to go after notifications. And I think as well that your team is starting to, understand how you work and work a bit better with you. So I thought, in terms of bringing it back to the group, from the tips that we just went over, I'd be really curious to know maybe one thing that you can take away today to be even more productive tomorrow. So I think with that, turn it back to you.
Thank you, Rachel. There's a question from Carlo. Mm-hmm. He's asking, do you use any productivity task management tool that is not Google Calendar? And also, how do you guys achieve internal synchronization, osmotic communication, while being 100% remote?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of aligning on work, so at Zengrowth, we use Basecamp for all of our project organizations. So all of our projects are structured there. And it's also a good place to align with clients and to store team communication. So you can, for example, I think, download your Slack communication and basically like upload it into the Basecamp. So everything's really contained. In terms of our communication day to day, this also takes place over Slack. And this, I think, works quite well for us because you can use Slack to communicate your working times, for example. You can also use it to pause notifications during your focus time. So just from these, from Slack itself, I think the product has a lot there to communicate how you're working to your team in an efficient way.
Awesome. There's a comment from Esther as well. She says, have a lot to learn regarding focus time, but for task management, I use Active Inbox. It's a Gmail extension you can use to create tasks out of emails, track emails, and when to expect a reply. Oh, that's a good one. Thanks, Esther.
Yeah, I think, I guess like going back to like the productivity market. And I think like really how we think about productivity, usually like in terms of like tools and like apps and things like this, I would say to maybe find one that works well for your team, especially like when it comes to project communication, to have like a common place for communication, if it's Slack or if it's something else, to really decide this as a team and stick with it so that, you know, you don't have communication going on everywhere and you can really pool it into one space. And then I think to know what works for you. And I think in terms of tools, you don't need too many, really. I think you probably need just like one tool to help you organize your time. If you're going to do it pen and paper, or if you're going to do it digitally to pick something. But then from there, not to let the tool, I guess, become a distraction from actually getting the work done, because in the end, that's the most important thing. So maybe, I mean, I guess like in terms of, yeah, the question that we have, becoming more productive tomorrow, let's start calling out people. Flavio, I'd be really interested to hear from you, maybe like what you do like in terms of productivity, or if there's like one killer app for you that's helped you become a lot more productive.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, recently I've been using Notion basically to organize everything there. And what has worked for me is basically to keep all the things in one app and not to keep it disorganized in different apps. So recently I've moved all my notes, everything, boards to Notion, and it's working.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a great point. Like by not having too many apps, it feels like I think each app also has like a notification, and if you've got like a lot, suddenly you have a chorus.
And it gets super messy, so.
Totally.
And also just to respond the question from Carlo about achieving eternal synchronization, I think it's first really important to agree on a goal, like what do you want to achieve together, and then have people do their homework first. And that's a very important part for me. So then you can collaborate in a Google Doc, for example, where you all provide an input. You do take your focus time to really think this through, and only then you get on an alignment call, because then results tend to be much greater. And before that, everyone has already looked into your input, has provided feedback, and then you can actually discuss any questions that you have left. And that way you can have much a better meeting, more productive time together, and then go into the next steps. I think that's what we did lately, Rachel, with our goal setting exercise in the company.
Exactly, and I think it's interesting. It's like, of course, like when you're in the office, like you can kind of always find people and communicate right away. Although I think for a goal, or maybe like for something that you're working on, a lot of times like this synchronous communication is almost like a nice to have, but it's not something that's completely necessary to getting things done. So I mean, of course, like it depends on like what the goal is, but it seems like it's also okay. Sometimes I think if an answer comes like a bit later, or, you know, like an hour later or something like this, if there's like a bit of a delay. Maybe, Esther, I think you're also there. I don't have to take a look at the chat.
Yes, sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, I was wondering for you, maybe because you also work remotely, if there's been like one app, for example, that you find has really helped you get more things done during the day.
Well, yeah, like I said, I use Active Inbox to manage all the mailboxes that come in, and you can create tags for them. And then what I do in my Google Calendar, I allot time to different projects. So Tuesday afternoon, I'm working on this project, and I've automated that emails coming in through certain domains, they end up in a certain have the flag, and then with Active Inbox, I plan them on that day and make sure that I don't like my mailbox to be fully loaded. So my mailbox is always empty, and Active Inbox tells me what emails I should focus on for that day. Yeah. But like I mentioned in my comment as well, I need a lot on focus time improvement because I have all my notifications off, but that just makes me open Slack more often to see if I've missed anything. So
yeah, I think like shutting off the notifications is great. What I've also experimented with is like for WhatsApp, using like the settings to let people know that I'll only be checking WhatsApp notifications like at 9, 12, and 3, which also keeps me accountable to those times. So like, I don't know, I think it depends too, just like on what you notice you struggle with, like in general, like as a person, which notifications, but kind of like using them to corral yourself into times where you check them.
yeah, and where is that setting in WhatsApp, for instance? Or is that your status?
It's in the status, exactly.
Yeah.
So I put it
Okay.
there.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Another thing I've tried is also using the grayscale on the cell phone so that it becomes less enticing and it's just like more like a tool. So yeah, I mean, personally, I like to kind of experiment and see what then has an impact on maybe getting my screen time down or making Instagram less of a distraction. But...
Yeah.
And I think Orca, for example, I'd be really interested to know from you, because I know, I think Zengrowth was your first remote job. Maybe what was one of like the obstacles you had in terms of like productivity, and like if you found a tool that really helped you?
Hi. So my biggest obstacle was like to actually know how much time do I need for something to get done. So Pomodoro timer really helped me. I discovered Pomodoro when I started to work with Zengrowth, and I started like to see how much time do I actually spend on something. And after this, like I would better plan my time, because later I would maybe overcommit to some things because I thought it takes less time, and then I would have a lot of tasks that would have actually time to do it. So then like this helped me like to manage my time much better.
Yeah.
And I also use like a tool that helps me like block social media so that I don't lose time on Facebook or other stuff, like because it's like also like for work you do like post something and then you see something interesting and then you lose yourself. So I like put my like timer, like how much time per day I can use social media. So this really helped me also.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it feels like this like self-knowledge piece is so important to productivity, and it's kind of like learning about yourself as you go. And I think also just trying not to judge like yourself and having some self-compassion, I would say, is also important. But yeah, I think with the Pomodoro timer, like once you know, okay, this takes 2 Pomodoros, you can kind of apply that to other tasks that might be similar. And from there, you know, you get going into this path of being able to accurately understand how much time something takes, and then get away from overcommitting. It's a really great tip.
And I think also in terms of communication, a lot of problems and inefficiencies come from unclear communication or different expectations that we have as people from different cultures as well. So what I found very interesting, and I saw that my ex-leader did it in my previous company, was creating a doc that was called How to Work With Me document that she shared then with all the direct reports. And it was a very honest and transparent kind of document that talked about the values that are most important for you. What do you really, what matters to you the most in a smooth working relationship? Then things you're good at, things you're not good at, which is as important as the first one. And that really needs a deep reflection and honesty to do this. I found it a very nice self-reflection and awareness exercise. Then things you expect from people, things you don't accept or dislike or you won't tolerate, and then what is your communication preference? So what is your hierarchy? Like, first of all, I like to be sent a Slack message, then a video call, then an email, then a WhatsApp. And I think that if you're misaligned in those things, you can really get frustrated very quickly just because you haven't talked it through. So if everyone in the company or just on certain positions creates this kind of doc, I think it makes it so much easier from the start to work together. And it doesn't matter that you've worked together for some time already, you can still create it and find out some new things about your colleagues.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this up, Marta. I think I remember when I received yours in the beginning of the time of working at Zengrowth. First, it was really good to know, like as a new joiner, and I think it also really establishes a nice culture of being able to be a bit, I guess, like vulnerable, I would say, like at the workplace, to say like, okay, these are the things I'm really good at. These are the things I'm not so good at. Because I think like a lot of the topic around productivity, for example, has to do with, you know, being honest about what you can get done in a day, being honest about like maybe where the boundaries are around your time. And this kind of communication can be uncomfortable sometimes. So it's really nice to have this sort of like open and inclusive culture established from the get-go.
Absolutely. And then Marco also said in the chat that for productivity and task management, we are also behind the scenes working on our new software called Clarity. And this will achieve synchronization between a Google Calendar, task management, and OKR, so objectives and key results. Something to stay tuned on.
Yeah, so I think we're almost at time here. I'm not sure if there are any other questions in the chat.
No, I think there are no more questions, so we can wrap up, and then we will send an email with the recording of this webinar, plus a really nice cheat sheet that we prepared with this framework. And also, if you have then any more questions, you can always reply to that email. I think Agustina also just sharing that her favorite tools are Calendly, Streak for mail organizations. I'm not sure if I know what you mean, but Agustina, if you want to just add.
I'm here. Yes, Streak is a plugin for Gmail that is very useful. It's a kind of similar like Pipedrive, but it's easier to use. It's a good tool.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we will list all those tools, I believe, in the cheat sheet. Yeah, thank you very much for everyone for coming, and yeah, I hope to see you on the next webinars as well. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.